Welcome to another episode, Pound for Pound Boxing Report. We are back after a couple of weeks off. I am your host, Michael. Joining me this week, usual cast of characters. Um, Gail, I'm sorry, Gail and Daniel. Gail from nyfights.com, Daniel from 4Boxing News and the Inscriber. What's going on, folks?
Well, we're back in action, and since it looks like one of the NCAA games is well in hand, it's time for a little boxing.
Indeed.
Yes.
For those who are new to Pound for Pound Boxing Report, Pound for Pound Boxing Report live YouTube show. Um, Live YouTube show, podcast, etc. Talking all things boxing. The motto is when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns the sweet science, it will get discussed. Um, if you want to check us out on social media, you can check us out on Twitter at P4P Boxing RPT. If you wish to email us, you can do so, P4P Boxing report.com. You also find us on Facebook, YouTube, and IG. If you wish to donate, let donation be the best nation. You could do so. I have a Cashmere account, but Cashmere account has updated their policies over the last 6 months. You cannot contribute as much as you used to. So I would prefer that you use PayPal, the PayPal option. Wouldn't matter if it's $1, $2, $5, whatever you wish or would like to contribute. We would be grateful to help the overall productions behind the scenes. Let's get things going by recapping fights this past weekend. Pretty loaded card. Even have some fights that unfortunately I will not be able to occur as a couple of title shots, world title shots over in Japan. We do have some Japanese related boxing news later on in the news segment. But let's start in Las Vegas, the rematch between Mikaela Mayer and Sandy Ryan. They fought uh, in the fall of last year. Controversy before the fight as Ryan, she got attacked. Someone throws a can of paint or whatever towards Ryan the night of the fight. Ryan went on with ahead with the fight anyway. Highly competitive, highly entertaining. Mayer got the decision, beating Ryan to win the WBO belt at 147 pounds. They had a rematch this past weekend. And I go to you, Gail. Equally exciting, in my opinion, but for me, Mayer was more decisive, um, particularly during the first half, first 2/3 of the fight. Mayer was more aggressive. She fought towards the front foot. And to me, she showed a little bit more power as she was able to get Ryan's attention more throughout the contest. She faded a little bit late in the championship rounds as Ryan came on. But by that point, Mayer, in my opinion, had built too much of a lead during the first during the first 7, 8 rounds. Mayer gets the decision. For me, given who she fought, given how she fought, this is one of Mikaela Mayer's best performances in her career.
Well, I would say that she had learned the lessons of the first fight and absorbed and applied them more than Ryan did. And she even said herself after the fight that she really feels settled in at welterweight now. Um, Having two fights, against Ryan in this division, and it definitely showed. She's got complete command. She said she feels her power more. She feels so much better at this weight, and in hindsight realizes she probably should have moved up long before she did. Nevertheless, she's here now, and she took care of business. It was impressive. It wasn't quite the barn burner of the first one, but comparisons are dangerous. We had nothing to compare to the first time around. After we'd seen such a good fight, to be able to replicate that was a really big ask. Nevertheless, it's a matter of degree. It was a great fight. It was competitive to a point. Ryan would have needed a miracle in the last few rounds, but as long as the fighter is still standing and still in the fight, you just never know. And she did win a couple of the later rounds to make the scorecards a little closer than they might have been, but it was still an absolute definitive win for Mayer. No question, no controversy whatsoever. Ryan gave it a great effort. She's still a viable competitor. But Meyer is now standing right at the brink of what she's wanted, which is a shot at being undisputed. And all roads lead to Lauren Price. And that would be a very exciting fight.
Absolutely. Follow-up question. You mentioned Lauren Price, who was coming off of a dominant win over Natasha Jonas a few weeks back. In England, Price has the other three belts at 147, right? The logical thing is for Price and Mayer to happen. The likelihood that we see it either by the end of this year or maybe at this point in 2026.
Oh, I think it'll be at the end of this year. The women's side of professional boxing, they just don't marinate because there aren't as many options at the top of each division, even in the lower weight divisions where you do have at least a few more fighters. I mean, your unified champion Price has only had 9 professional fights after an exceptional amateur career, mind you. But still, that's the way the women's game plays out. I really don't see any sort of stay busy or easy touch fight for either woman. I mean, what's the point? The money is with each other. And I could see this fight happening late summer in the United Kingdom, where women's boxing is a massive draw. Lauren Price is a big star now in England and Great Britain. She is the first women's fighter from Wales to get to this level. And if their fight, Meyer and Price, is even a fraction as good as Meyer's fights with Sandy Ryan, it won't be just one. The women are all about rematches, trilogies. If they're putting on exciting fights, they don't hesitate to do it again. Right here is a good example. Meyer beat Ryan. There was no rematch clause. There was no imperative for them to fight again other than it was a great fight the first time. Meyer felt that Ryan deserved another chance. They knew it would be a draw. They knew it would be competitive and exciting, and they went for it. That's what we need to see in boxing. So if we get a Meyer Price trilogy, and maybe you do the first fight in the UK, the second fight here, the third fight back there, that's the biggest money either of them can make with the biggest audience.
I couldn't agree more. You mentioned how uh, Price has emerged. Uh, Mayer has some visibility as well over in England. England, having fought there a handful of times. Her disputed loss to Bumgarner was in England. She's done some commentary over in the UK as well, so folks know her there. I'm not going to an argument. I ain't gonna say she's just as popular, but she has a fan base over in England for sure. Let's hope the fight happens this summer, early fall. I don't know if it'll be on ESPN, well, on ESPN or Box or Sky platform, but the bottom line is that's the fight to be made. On the undercard, Daniel, you had look it in truth, welterweight is not that hot of the division right now. What used to be a glamour division in boxing, what is a glamour division in boxing, doesn't have the shine, doesn't have the star right now. One of the champions there is Brian Norman. Fought Derrieck Cuevas. A lot of folks talk about Boots Ennis as the guy at 147, and I tend to agree with that. But as Norman showed in this fight against Cuevas, he's on the come up. After the fight, he talked about Boots who's going to fight in the unification bout. I want to say next month, right? Uh,
Hmm.
I'm not going to say that Norman would beat Boots at this point, but if Boots wins next month, I wouldn't mind seeing a Jerron in this Brian Norman fight at the end of 2025.
I don't think anybody would be against it because Norman, in this, remember, this is his first title defense. He did what a lot of fighters have to do in their first defense: show a depth of skill, show that the challenger is not on his level or can't handle his power. And by the middle of the second round, you started to tell that Cuevas unfortunately wasn't able to handle not only the power of Norman, but the accuracy. And in the second round, he had shaky legs. He got knocked down in the third, if I remember correctly. And at that point, you could tell Cuevas got the will to fight beaten out of him because as soon as the referee, Robert Taylor, asked him, turn around, he did. He just went straight to his corner. He didn't even have to say a word. But that shows great power from Norman and a good accuracy too, because he caught him on a good, decent check hook. And the check hook is almost always the guaranteed punch that will rock you, particularly in this weight division. So he did what he was supposed to do. Now, as long as Boots handles his business, that would be a very interesting fight. I would still pick Boots over Norman at this stage, but it makes it a little bit more interesting, especially as a champion when you've already had your first defense to show that okay, I've been the best in the division, or I am among the best in the division. I wanted to fight the other best.
If not Boots, you know who I like to see him fight? Teofimo. Lopez is. We all know the controversy around Teofimo, particularly over the past 6 months. Let's say the things that he's been doing, his shenanigans. Uh, he's talked about moving up to 147 eventually. I'm like, okay, bet. They both would top. They're both with top rank. Um, I would. It would not surprise me that the way that Teofimo's talking, the way he's, let's face it, been alienating folks. Um, he wants smoke at welterweight. Okay, put him in there against Norman. See what you're really about. I'm sure Norman would accept the fight. If Teofimo is about that, he wouldn't mind going up to 47 to fight him. Uh, he's not going to roll over Norman. I'll tell you that. And it'll be an entertaining scrap as well. So if you can't get Boots, why not fight Teofimo? Also on this card, Gail, you had maybe the um one of the hottest, not just prospects anymore, but contenders in all of boxing. Featherweight Bruce Shushu Carrington, easy work of Vivas, stopped him in three. The question isn't, is he ready for a world title shot? The question is, Gail, is Bruce Shushu Carrington the uncrowned featherweight champion of the world? Because if skill matters, if talent matters, he can not only fight with any other featherweight champions out there, he could beat them all.
He could, but I am not 100% sold just yet on Shushu. The previous fights before this performance, his last two fights, were decent. They were wins. They weren't spectacular. Most people missed him on the Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson deep undercard. And it was not a dominant performance by any means. He had some rough moments. So this was a fight he absolutely needed. Can he beat all of the champions at featherweight? He'd be competitive, no question. But yeah, we're talking about guys like Rafael Espinoza, Nick Ball, Brandon Figueroa, Fulton. Those are very heavy lifts. He's absolutely earned the chance to go up and test himself. Angelo Leo, too. It's a competitive division. I think he'd have a lot of problems with somebody like Nick Ball. I do think that what we're going to see, and this is Top Rank's MO, is should Rafael Espinoza win his fight here in another week or so, that's the fight they're going to tee up. It's in-house, it's doable. Top Rank likes to do that. And they are absolutely willing to put their top guys in a division up against each other when they get to the point that they need to back one horse or the other. They'll do it. So I think that we can all count on seeing that fight again, somewhere in the third quarter of the year.
My only major concern with Shushu is weight. How long can he hold 126? Because if you watch him doing the weigh-in, his body is starting to look gaunt, emaciated.
And
He looked
he's
real.
admitted that. So I think he wants to get a belt at featherweight. And the minute he does, he'll move up.
Indeed. Let's move on to from Las Vegas, Daniel,
Mm-hmm.
to Mexico. Um, Yokasta Valle, two division champion at 105, 108, present champion at junior flyweight, right? But she's making the move up to 112. A former unified champion at flyweight, Marlen Esparza. She got the win, right? Two things I got from this. Um, yes, Esparza was a unified champion, but given recent form, I wonder if she was a situation where she was the product of some very astute matchmaking. That's number one. Number two, Valier is a very good fighter, right? She gave Sinicia Estrada problems in their unification bout, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
excellent win over Bermudez, who's also a two division champion. But do I see Valier beating Gabriel Fundora, who's undisputed champion at 112 pounds? No.
This this was an interesting fight because let's first of all, unfortunately, not even the form of Marlon. It's the fact that she missed weight again.
Yeah.
That it's the third fight in a row now where Marlon has missed weight. There is something happening in her camp with her. Either she's trying to stay at 112, doesn't want to do 115, or like the week before camp, she just stops carrying. I don't know what it is. But that's a bad sign right there if you're a fan of Martin Esparza. So your first inclination that this is more a bit of student matchmaking is a little bit more on because if you would have told me, and I think we could probably got this in the podcast producers, if we would have talked 6 months before the fight with Sinicia, we would not even recognize the fighter that Yokosuka Valle is now compared to that. And that should tell you how drastic that step up in skill has been. Because a lot of, not only did she effectively beat Marlon, she might have broken Marlon's spirit the way I saw the fight. It was good combination, great pacing throughout, and it could be a situation where maybe the higher weight does benefit her. Even though, like at 105, she did really well. Like we mentioned, she gave Sinicia a fight that nobody expected. But if you're thinking right now at this stage, versus a Gabby Fundora that has the same mean streak that her brother has, probably more. And if you hear from Nurkic is the more skilled fighter out of the two, I would probably hesitate to do that yet. I'll probably give Valle a couple of more fights and let Fundora get a couple more defenses under her belt until you make that match. But by then, we might be talking about a similar situation from the Senicia fight as far as perception.
Yeah, indeed. Again, Valier moving up to 112 looks like all roads are leading to a fight with Fundora in terms of name recognition. Excellent fight. It's just for me from a competitive standpoint, she may give Fundora some problems, but I just think that Fundora is too big, too long, too powerful for the likes of a Value at 112 pounds in particular. Just like we talked about Shushu Carrington, Gail had an easy night against Vivas. Same thing with Oscar Collazo, who is unified champion at 105 pounds. Made easy work of Edwin Cano, blitzed them, not pretty much blitzed them. I'll say that, right? The question is, in the aftermath of this, is there anyone at 105 who gives this dude a challenge? The WBC champion, right? Melvin Jerusalem, he already beat him, knocked him out in 7. I don't know if Tateron, who's IBF champion, gives him a tough go either. Should he stay at 1-5 and try to become undisputed champion, or should the team at Golden Boy think about possibly seeking greater options for Collazo at 108 pounds?
So the options for him at 105, title holders that would be his road to becoming undisputed, are not going to challenge him. Now, Jerusalem won his fight last night, so he's successfully defended and is in the mix. But Collazo has already blitzed through him once. He'd do it again. The IBF challenger, he just doesn't have the resume. So he certainly deserves the opportunity. But again, Collazo is a phenomenon. If he weighed 165 pounds or 85 pounds instead of 105 pounds, he'd be an absolute huge star.
Man, look, it's been a long time since I've seen someone that small, that rocked up as he is.
Yeah. He's charismatic. He's Puerto Rican. He's bilingual. He's so likable. And he delivers. He delivers exciting performances. There is a carrot dangling, though, here at 105, and that amazingly, there's never been a undisputed champion at minimum weight, and certainly not in the 4-belt era. And shockingly, never an undisputed Puerto Rican champion among the men in any division. That's a huge accomplishment. As long as Collazo is making 105 easy, and apparently he is, I think he needs to check the boxes off and get it done. They aren't maybe the biggest challenges, but that legacy is really too big to ignore. He accomplishes that. He's a lock for the Hall of Fame. I tell you that right now. And then he can move up to 108. Maybe he gets up to 112, 115. I'm not sure he's going to go much beyond that, but you never know. So why not try to give that a go? And I really think it wouldn't be too tough for him. And I don't think he needs to drag out the fights. He could do that easily within the next year, and then he could move up and see what he's got among the talent at 108. And it'll be fun to watch him. He's a draw. So, he's one of those fighters for his fans. They don't really care who's standing across from him.
At the very least, he's established himself as one of the absolute best, an elite fighter in boxing's lower weight division. If he keeps going at this rate, um, he's going to be scratching the pound for pound list as well. he's looked
Good,
that good.
good point. And what I really love about him is he is such an evangelist for the value of the lower weight division fighters. You know, that's something we value here among us on the Pound for Pound Boxing Report. We're all about the lower weight divisions. Those of you who don't keep an eye on them, you know, you are missing out. They're exciting, they're fast. There's never a dull fight, you know, much below 122
I mean,
because
look,
they're
Exhibit A. We're not going to talk about it here because a little bit pressed for time. But that Ibuki win, Masamichi Ibuki, which was a bloodbath, him going up from 108 to 112 to win the IBF flyweight title. For those who've seen it, yeah, if you like blood and gut
absolutely.
gore, that's
Yeah.
it.
You just don't see a lot of stinkers in these lower weight divisions. You know, these guys all bring it and they have nothing to lose, honestly. And if you didn't know exactly how big they were and you just saw them walk into a ring, you know, it doesn't scream at you that they are these small guys. They're just solid. So if those of you have really not turned your attention towards the likes of Collazo and, you know, the other fighters that are getting attention for the lower weight divisions, you know, finally I do perceive more respect for them thanks to the Bam Rodriguez's, the Collazos, the Inoues, the Nakatanis. It's about damn time.
Absolutely. The Collazo win, as well as the Costa Valles win, that took place in Mexico, was aired live on the Zone. The main event was the rematch between William Zepeda and Tevin Former. I want both of you in this discussion to recap this fight. I'm going to start off with you, Daniel, and then you can follow up, Gail. Their first battle last year, many people were surprised at how competitive Farmer was. There were some in the boxing community who felt that he deserved the win over Zepeda in their first encounter. They fought again. Weird things happened here, right? Zepeda got the win, but there was a lot of drama that ensued during the contest. A large suspicion that Farmer hurt his hand, was fighting with one hand, that he suffered a hurt, I think, right hand throughout the contest, right? There was a moment in the 12th round where it looked like Farmer could have been credited for a knockdown, didn't get it. Farmer's unbelievably tough, right? Taking shots, but kept fighting back, had his moments in there, surely. Zepeda got the win, but I think just like in the first fight, Farmer gets more credit, especially given what he disclosed today on Twitter, because once again, I refuse to call it X. And that is, people were noticing during the fight that he had these kind of ticks during the fight and in between rounds. He disclosed that he's fighting with Tourette's. He suffers from Tourette's syndrome. So given their questions about him fighting with an injured hand, that was something that his performance that performance was something on his behalf. It almost got just as much attention as Zepeda winning the fight. And as far as Zepeda is concerned, before I go on, he got the win. He got the win in the first fight. For people who want to continue to talk about him beating Shakur, I don't know based on these two fights.
Yeah, well, the main situation when it comes to this is it's similar in many ways to the Mikaela Mayer fight to me, in that Zepeda learned a little bit more about what he needed to do. He needed to attack the body more. He had to make sure he put the right amount of pressure on Farm more to make sure he wasn't able to time him, because that was one of the big issues in the first fight. Farmer was beginning to time him pretty well. But in this fight, he focused more on the body attack, and he focused more on making sure the Farmer didn't get a rhythm. And it worked fairly well. Like, you can make an honest case that the fight could have been stopped in the fifth round, because that was the round where Farmer had a bit of a slip, too. And I know some Zepeda fans wanted to call that a knockdown, but no, that was a slip. Let's be real. And you could tell after the end of that round, that's where probably people get the idea the farmer was hurt. Because he was leaning in the corner and he almost feels like he's a little bit of agony. But interestingly enough, as the fight went on, particularly in the later rounds, Farmer got into his groove. So even if he was hurt, he got into his groove. He started doing the timing of Zepeda. And even though, to me, Zepeda won the fight a little bit more decisively than the first one, Tevin Farmer should have been credited that knockdown. A punch landed, the gloves fell. It should have been counted as a knockdown. Would it have made a difference in the fight? No. But he should have at least gotten that. And again, this is a situation like you mentioned. Farmer got more recognition. He got more praise in defeat than Zepeda did in victory, mainly because this is what Zepeda was supposed to do. The first fight, Tevin Farmer was just supposed to be a guy that's supposed to test him from a technical standpoint. And he did well, but not enough for a lot of people's eyes in the first fight. He did better this time around. And even though he did not get the knockdown with Farmer, even though he didn't get docked for the knockdown with Zepeda, he still showed resilience. He showed that, okay, I'm hurt, but my legs were steady. And he was able to weather the storm throughout. And even though his Farmer was starting to clinch towards the end. But it's good fight all around, but there's a lot, you could see there's a bit of question, particularly with Zepeda later in the fight. Not conditioning. That dude is a machine. But as far as probably polishing up his defense, his technique late on the fights, that's the if scenario where if you make the fight of Shakur could easily take him to the late rounds and easily then could punch more accurately, punch faster, and punch harder. Those are the questions Zepeda has still yet to answer.
Your thoughts, Gail?
I think that, if I'm looking at a guy with 8 losses like Farmer, he's got to be the best 8-loss fighter currently active in boxing right now. Yes, he's lost to Zepeda twice. Competitive losses, fights that he was in right to the end, where no one really expected that kind of performance. This is a guy who's getting an impressive second win in his career, and he is still competitive, in my opinion, among the top 10 in the lightweight division. He's a worthy opponent for any of the top names. He'll give them a test, and better yet, they are entertaining fights, and you can't overlook that aspect. People now know what he's capable of bringing, and they want to see it. Zepeda, to me, was the clear winner both times, close but clear. As Daniel said, his engine is just undeniable. It's astonishing to see ringside. If you ever have the opportunity to see Zepeda in person and you've enjoyed watching him, on a broadcast, seeing him in person, he's just a phenomenon. It's really hard to imagine. This is somebody who grew up and trained his entire life in high altitude in the mountains outside of Mexico City. He isn't a guy that just went up to altitude for a training camp, and the results show. His stamina is off the charts. I can't even imagine what medical office would measure his VO2 max. It's just got to be unbelievable. But you've still got to be able to punch. You've still got to have power. you still need to know what to do with an opponent in the ring. And he gets caught once in a while because he's so willing to engage. That's the price you pay. But judges like activity in the ring, and gives it to them. There's no question who the busy guy in the ring is. Interestingly, though, they both threw fewer punches and landed fewer punches in this fight than they did the first one. Still an action-packed fight. Farmer's issues, there was a lot of speculation about an injury, right, in that first round. We've never heard confirmation. Farmer has never discussed it. He didn't answer any questions in the post-fight interview about it. He was just simply ticked that he was once again on the short end of a fairly tight decision. He truly felt he'd won that fight. I didn't see it, but his performance was still extremely good in a losing fight. So I would welcome seeing him again. What's transpired today, now a day and a half later, has been an interesting discussion about other issues he's been facing and whether that is why he had been so inactive until recently for quite some time between the start of his career now. It fills in a lot of blanks. He disclosed because fans noticed either something caused by an injury or some tics. We're worried about some neurological issues with the guy, this veteran that they were looking at. He said, no, that's not it. Well, gosh, I haven't told y'all, but I'm fighting through Tourette's syndrome. So that's a story worth exploring, and perhaps he'll feel like talking about it some more. But that's quite a story. If he's dealing with that and still fighting at this level, and a story worth telling.
Indeed, and the question after this is Zepeda is, I believe, WBC interim champion at 135. Will they? But he's also ranked number one in a couple other sanctioning bodies.
He's ranked number one in every single sanctioning body. Every single one of them.
Will Golden Boy pursue a fight between Zepeda or Shakur, or will they go another route? What say y'all before we move on?
Well, your title holders in that division include Shakur. They also include Keyshawn Davis, and they include Lomachenko. Now, there's a lot of speculation about whether Vasily Lomachenko is going to continue his boxing career or not, and what his options are. My opinion on that depends on the day you ask me. I think we're still sort of on the fence. I'm leaning more toward Loma being done than not. But you never know what draws someone back, and we're going to talk about that with another fighter later in the show. But I think that Top Rank is not quite ready for a Davis versus Stevenson fight again. And that kind of a fight. I do think that a fight with Shakur is very viable. Top Rank and Golden Boy have worked together plenty of times, especially recently. It's a crazy style matchup. There could not be two more diametrically opposed styles than Stevenson and Zepeda. I do think it would be competitive, and I would like to see it. Is it a good fight for Zepeda? Ugh. Stevenson is just so defensively skilled, and that's what it takes to keep somebody like Zepeda off. But it will be a big job for Shakur to do that because Zepeda is relentless. So I see that as a truly a good fight to watch. Interesting, a lot of variables. it all comes down, like a lot of fights between two different style matchups, as to who can impose his preferred version of the fight on the other. So we'll have to see what happens. I do think that's entirely a viable fight.
I would probably say Keyshawn would probably be the more reasonable fight for Zepeda because, again, it's still top ranking Golden Boy. So no political hurdles there. And not to mention, if you could beat somebody like Keyshawn Davis fairly well, you have a stronger case for making the fight with Shakur because, unfortunately, the Loma situation is Gail's not the only one who will give you a different answer depending on the day. Because
Good to
unfortunately,
know.
yeah, because one day you would think he's going to come in, another days you think no, he wants to retire. Because we have to remember, people like Loma, like Usyk, they started their professional careers fairly late compared to other fighters because they spend so much time in the amateurs. You couple that with unfortunately the situation is still happening in Ukraine. So there's a lot of factors that you could say that may push Loma to retire. But
So
also
let's
you could say again.
so let's say that Loma retires. He's holding the IBF belt, and the IBF is pretty rigid about its rules. It enforces its mandatories. It's interesting if you look at the current rankings under Loma, to see who's there. You've got guys like Eddie Cruz and Raymond Morataya. If the belt is vacant, who are they going to order to fight? That's where it's going to come down. And if Loma does retire, that opens a lane that's a lot more achievable, honestly, for any of the contenders who want to go for it. It's going to depend on what the IBF decides. And God knows if they pluck some, obscure guy in the top 5 or 6, yeah, that could happen too. See William's skull.
Yeah, and with that, because I still upset at having to cover William Skull's uh, fight to win the title, and I still will make an argument he's the world champion in boxing. So when his name is mentioned, I'm triggered, and the fact he's going to possibly fight Canelo next. Yeah. Let's move on to some news. News broke that Bomb Squad Deontay Wilder is making the return to the ring. Reports are he's going to fight in June against a guy by the name of Tyrrell Herndon, Wichita, Kansas. Daniel, who? Why? Call me a cynic, but if this is what we're going to get from Wilder up next, he might as well contemplate retirement because given who he is and what he was, this kind of fight may be beneath him.
It's not so much that it's a fight beneath him. It's a situation of what version of Deontay Wilder are we going to get still? Because we've watched that man, both his aura, like if you want to talk about aura, like the aura of semi-invincibility and his toughness get broken down in each Fury fight that came afterwards. And unfortunately, that does a lot. That does a lot for somebody, especially the type of heavyweight that he is, that he has a good frame, but unfortunately, we have to remember they called his legs chicken legs for a reason, unfortunately. But it's that power. That power's still there. if there's any chance that he's able to land, he might make an entertaining fight, but it's not a situation where that type of fight, then you immediately say, okay, now we can make an AJ fight, or maybe we can make a Joyce or a Dubois, even a Zhilei Zhang at this point. Again, it's just unfortunately a situation where I think we're dealing with somewhat damaged goods now with Deontay Wilder. And if it's at the stage of his career where he's going to be taking what are essentially club fights in order to keep his name there, and maybe he hopes the blood money mark actually gives him another big payday, that could be it. But that is a sad way to go, unfortunately. But like I said, we're dealing with a man that is in a completely different mindset and a completely different situation from before the first Fury fight.
News surfacing from Japan, Gail. You mentioned during the discussion about Collazo's win that Melvin Jerusalem, who holds a belt at 105 pound WBC version, he defended the belt with a rematch win over Shigeoka in Japan, right? I mentioned Masamichi Yabuki, who moved up to 112 pounds, won the IBF flyweight title, right? Well, earlier today at a banquet um, in Japan, some back and forth between undisputed two division, undisputed champion Naoya Inoue and um, Nakatani, who is a three division champion, current WBC champion at 108 pounds. There's been a lot of talk of them two eventually fighting at this banquet where Inoue won Fighter of the Year in Japan. He kind of laid down the gauntlet in terms of a potential bout with Nakatani. Basically, on the podium, accepting an award, looked down at Nakatani and said, "Let's make this fight happen this time next year." Junto Nakatani responded by saying to Inoue, "Yeah, we can fight. Let's do it." So it looks like in the aftermath of that, could we see um, a Naoya Inoue Junto Nakatani fight happen, say March, April 2026? Based off those words, the interaction, the back and forth between those two seems a distinct possibility.
I don't think this is news, honestly. It was a fun encounter. They got to trash talk each other a little bit, nothing serious. Great photo ops. They got up on stage together at one point. This has been being discussed for months. I mean, it is a clear through line, plot line as they continue to mow down their opponents. They are both on a road heading toward each other. And it's easily another year off, no question. The challenge possibly is if if they just can't find a way to meet in the middle. Inoue is not a big fighter. He is moving up, but I would suspect if he had to move down a bit, it wouldn't be a problem. Nakatani is smaller than Nui, so that's going to be part of the issue. But time may solve a lot of that equation. And eventually it's going to be the showdown everybody wants to see. And both, I think, want to put it a little more toward the back half of their careers. And I'm not sure either one of them consider themselves past the halfway point just yet. But it's fun to think about, speculate. Surely they'll cross each other's paths and, sort of give each other the eye and like, yeah, I got you in my sights. So it's fun to speculate about. And it's a very makeable fight. I have no doubt it will happen somewhere down the line. Again, there is going to be some need to lay the foundation for Nakatani in particular among North American audiences. He's less known, which is ironic because he lives and trains in Los Angeles. But Inoue is a pretty defined star finally at this point among the English-speaking world. Nakatani still got a little ways to go to make that an absolute spectacular mega fight. It'll be fun, can't wait. That's when everyone needs to plan their trip to Japan.
From my understanding and doing some digging, Inoue is going to fight, of course, in May. If he's successful there, he'll defend against Agmadaliev in September. Then another possible fight in December, maybe against Nick Ball, and then run it back, and then run it with Nakatani, while Nakatani will pursue a unification bout, maybe in his next fight against one of the other champions at 118, and then continue to campaign at 118 and may move up to 122 at the end of this year, with the goal again of those two fighting in April. That's what I was able to dig up in the hours leading up to the show. But it looks like all roads are leading to them fighting. If it does, one of the best matchups of the year, no doubt. I think from 18 to 26, Nakatani stands the best chance of beating Inoue, who's already a Hall of Famer. Let's hope it happens, and I'll leave it at that. Last bit of news here is during our time off, sad news, Gail and Daniel, excuse me. George Foreman, right? Two-time heavyweight champion of the world, one of the more endearing figures in the sport, particularly over the last, dare I say, 30, 40 years. Kind of a, not kind of a, one of boxing's true redemption stories. Well, news that he passed away on March 21st at the age of 76. I haven't heard anything about the cause of his death, but apparently he passed away with his family around him. I'll go back to you, Gail. Your thoughts on the passing of one big George Foreman?
George Foreman, forget boxing. George Foreman is one of the most incredible comeback stories in sports ever. 20 years apart, he became the heavyweight champion of the world. Both times when being the heavyweight champion of the world made you an absolute superstar among, certainly in American culture and worldwide culture. It was what George did between his reigns and after, in addition to his sporting accomplishments, that just made him a cultural icon outside of sports and in. And he reinvented himself in a way that Americans really admire. You start off with achievements in one arena. As a young heavyweight champion, he was an Olympic gold medalist. He went on to have an excellent early career as a very feared, mean, rough guy. And his persona was very much that way, scowling, snarling guy. He was a completely different man and different fighter the second time around. Much of it he attributed to a religious awakening, and in a lot of the time away, he opened a church, started youth programs, and was a minister. He only returned to fighting because he needed money to keep his church and his programs alive. He ended up supporting his life's work on behalf of his faith, beyond his wildest dreams. Not only did he get back and achieve his goal to become a heavyweight champion, the oldest champion in boxing until Bernard Hopkins beat his record in his mid 40s, at 45, I believe, was the record. but his new warm persona that was so different than his first go around obviously influenced him by having this religious awakening, made him so much more accessible to the public, and it made him an entertainment figure, a broadcaster, and then of course this amazing business pitch man. He became, the celebrity spokesperson before we really had such a thing. And the George Foreman grill will go down as maybe the most improbable marketing legacy of all time. As I understand it, he was not even the first choice to endorse this, grill, this new concept in kitchen appliances, but he signed on, and he made estimates range that he made 40% off every grill sold, and millions of those damn things were sold. He never, ever had to worry about his church and his programs running out of money again. Bless him for all he accomplished. And it did come as a shock. He was so ingrained in our culture. There's a sports personality that anyone in America would have recognized walking down the street, whether they ever watched him fight or not. And we had not heard that he was ill. We had not heard any concerns about him. And it was on a late Friday, week and a half ago, that the announcement came out. And I have to admit, it definitely caught me by surprise, as it did, I think, by the entire boxing world and all of America, certainly. We all had to really scramble to get our obituaries posted. We did not think that was going to be necessary for a long time to come. And the remembrances and the discussions about George's place in the world are still ongoing, and I don't think they will ever end. It was, without a doubt, a life incredibly well lived, and no one can ask for more than that.
Your thoughts, Daniel, on the passing of George Foreman?
You have to look at his life in 3 or 4 acts. The beginning, obviously, coming in through the amateurs, beating Joe Frazier the way he beat Joe Frazier to become a champion. And then, unfortunately, lose a bit of, that aura in the Rumble in the jungle with Ali. Be able to focus his life outside of sports, building the church, building the gym, and then to come back at an age, remember, this is 44 in the 90s. An age where, granted, it's still somewhat to this day, but it's not as surprising as it would be in the 90s. An athlete in his 40s is considered almost geriatric at that point. But not only was he able to come back, he did it effectively well and became a champion again. And then to transition to being a commentator, doing so well. I still remember the calls that he made, as particularly the line. He was able to admit when he was wrong. I'll give him that. He was able to admit when he was wrong, because one of the best examples of that is how he called the Bernard Hopkins Trinidad fight. He kept harping on about, Hopkins his legs have been straight. Like he kept saying it. His legs are gonna give out. Tito's gonna get him. And then at the end of that fight, when we all knew that Hopkins shocked the world beating Tito Trinidad, one of the best lines you could hear. I wish I could find my words so I could eat them. That's quintessential George Foreman. A man that's willing to admit that he was wrong, man that's pretty humble, and is more known, like I said, it's true, it's more known probably now in the cultural lexicon for a product that he was not the first picture. I think at one point, this may be wrestling lore, but I think Hulk Hogan at one point even tried to say a story that he was offered the endorsement of the what would be the George Foreman grill line before Foreman. But luckily he took it, changed his life. Like I said, like Gail mentioned, he never had to worry about money again. And the other main thing you have to remember from a, like I said, it's a quirky standpoint, but he's the only man that I know that would name all of his sons and his daughters as well after him. Folks, if you don't believe me, look it up. Every single one
Yep.
of his sons is named George.
The only thing close is all of the boxing Russell brothers being named Gary.
Yeah, even then they had middle names. No,
Yeah,
all of
they
them
at
were
least
George.
do. Right.
I think that the daughters they named Georgina. So,
Georgina or Georgette, something like that. Yeah, what a riot.
yeah, but he like I said, he'll be missed. I was legitimately shocked that he passed because he looked like I said, like a man who took care of himself. After, like I said, after retiring after fighting into it, but
But
it
you know
happens.
what
That's
was
what life is.
But you know what
So
was
yeah,
interesting? What was interesting? And at New York Fights, one of our writers and actually a former fighter himself, Tommy Raynone, has been writing about George, and he pointed out that between the time he retired in his 20s and when he came back to boxing in those 20 years, he did not work out. He did not go to a gym. He apparently did not lift a finger in all those years. That is amazing that he then stepped back into a training routine after that much time off and still came back at the level he did.
it goes to the adage. We always say it. The last thing to go from a fighter is power.
Yep. Well, there's your proof. Absolutely.
Absolutely. I don't have nothing much to add. Like Daniel says, there were stages of George Foreman's career, right? Him, the struggle that he went through growing up in the streets of Houston. Street kid found boxing, right? Used that to kind of steer his life together. Won the Olympic gold medal in '68, and then became this intimidating, almost Sonny Liston type of figure early on in his career. The dismantling of George Foreman, Ken Norton, and others, and then the Ali bout, right? October of '74, where against all odds, Ali beat and stopped Foreman. And Foreman was tormented by that, right? Remember the situation where he beat Jimmy Young, but then he kind of had this hallucinogenic moment, which led to a retirement. And he literally had a come to Jesus moment where he became a preacher, um, and served God and served the people. And he eventually found his way back into boxing and became this happy-go-lucky, endearing figure, and ultimately regained the heavyweight title and became not just an endearing figure to the public, but quite the uh, marketing guy with the George Foreman grill. Heck, I had one, multiple, right? That he even had his own television show briefly, and the commentary worked with HBO and for several years. So when you talk about someone who lived a full life, uh, for good or bad, better and worse, that was George Foreman, and may he rest in honor again for those who have been sleeping under a rock. Uh, Former two-time heavyweight champion George Foreman passed away on December 21st at the age of 76, and we all uh, send our regards to the family, the friends of one Big George. here at the Pound for Pound Box Report. Let's move on to preview some of these fights here that's happening this upcoming weekend. I'll go with you, Gail. In Las Vegas, card on ESPN Plus. Want to focus on the headliner, not the most high profile gig, if you will, high profile kind of contest. But I got the suspicion this is the kind of fight that you love. As Richard Torrez, you know his story from the Olympics. He's been making his way up the heavyweight ranks. Kind of a grudge match against Guido Vianello. Not too prominent, high profile names, but kudos to Top Rank for making this fight happen. I think this is going to be entertaining. Hardcore fans delight here, if you will, on ESPN Plus. The winner of this, they're not going to move closer to a title shot, anything here. But for fight fan, this is a fight fans fight, right? And at the very least, I think these two are going to put on quite the barn burner, whoever wins.
Top Rank loves to do this, and I applaud them for it. They'll have guys that are just sort of bubbling under the top level like this that have been grinding along, and they'll pit them against each other and say, may the best man win, and they move the winner forward, and the loser, may still have a role in the organization, but they put them to battle against each other to see, where they're going to, put their best effort behind them. And so it's sink or swim. Torrez is such a conundrum because he has all the potential and this similar type of charisma outside the ring, that guys like Foreman have. He is a very interesting personality. He's built for social media. He's great at it. But he's so small in this era of heavyweights. And that's the big question mark. He's listed, I think, at 6'2.5". And I think that half is a mirage. He's a small, blocky heavyweight. But Usyk is a small heavyweight. So I think that Torres sees himself somewhat in that vein. He's very active in the ring. He's very mobile because he knows that he's got to work around his size in this era of standing across from guys 4 and 5 inches and 50 pounds heavier than he is. Vianello, is an interesting study because, he looked like he was going to do great things, and, sort of an interesting guy as an Italian, super heavyweight, but he hasn't quite worked, he hasn't quite met expectations, but he still passes that eye test, and there are still believers in him that say, yeah, maybe he's just a late bloomer, maybe he's still got it in him. I think that he has reached his potential, in my opinion. So I do applaud again Top Rank for pitting them against each other, sink or swim where the best man win. And I do think Torres will prevail. I think it might be a rough fight, but he has faced fighters very similar to Vianello in the amateurs. He was an incredibly successful amateur despite his size. He fought Bektamir Jalilov multiple times, and he was competitive with him in the Olympics. He eventually lost, but he was standing across from a guy who just loomed over him and was still competitive. So I think he'll be able to take out Vianello. One word about Torres. Everybody's saying, has been looking at this news about Deontay Wilder, wondering, who's this guy you're going to fight? Who's this dude named Tyrrell Anthony Herndon? Well, if you've ever seen Herndon, it was probably when he fought Richard Torrez Jr. in 2023. And Torrez went after Herndon and blew him out in 2 rounds. So there's your backstory on Tyrrell Anthony Herndon. Torrez had no problems with him. I do think he'll win the fight, and they're going to sell it well. I think that the fight week will be a lot of fun. They'll do their part to get people's eyeballs on it, and we'll see who prevails.
On the same day, Daniel, Torrez and Vianello is going to happen in Vegas on the same day, also on ESPN Plus, but in Kazakhstan. Janibek Alimkhanuly, who is unified champion at 160, homecoming fight against a Frenchman by the name of, I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name because I would butcher it, Anauel. This seems that this is top rank doing Kazakh style a solid here, giving him a homecoming defense against a guy a lot of us hadn't heard of. It's hard finding video of this dude. You kind of can see this for what it is. Your thoughts, Daniel?
Yeah, it's interesting to me that that Janibek's getting this. Luckily, mainly because of the help of one Mr. Gennady Golovkin, the last Kazakh fighter we know that was the middleweight kingpin for a good while, right, who I think he's still, I don't know if he's fully now, he's still the president of the Olympic division for Kazakhstan. So we can see where it is mainly for this type of fight, but it's also a situation where, unfortunately, like you mentioned before, with the situation with Norman and Boots 147, it's a glamour division, but there's not a lot of luster. Middleweights, unfortunately, facing the same situation in that same way. We have some guys at 154 that can make it happen, but unfortunately, the stage is where it is. Janibek is obviously one of the classes, not the class in the division right now. And unfortunately, he hasn't been able to develop either connection or the type of resume that Golovkin did in order for him to have a good, like I said, great strong following here in the US. So it kind of makes sense now that he gets a homecoming fight. It's more likely going to be a soft touch, and he'll get the big cheer, he'll get the big crowd. But after that, you really gotta hope that a lot of the guys that are 154 make the move because the middleweight division needs it.
Or should he win? From my mom hearing in these boxing streets, should Janibek win, he could possibly be looking at a move up to 168 pounds. He got to get rid of this. He got to handle business in this fight, of course, coming up. But we will see what the future holds for him. Also on the 5th, Gail, over in the UK, on the zone, you have Joyce, right? Coming off of the losses to coming off of the back-to-back losses, right? Gotten stopped in his last outing against Zhilei Zhang, fighting Filip Hrgovic, who is also coming off of a loss here. So kind of a crossroads heavyweight bout here. Your thoughts?
This is a loser goes home kind of fight, to see who's still viable. And there's so much action in the heavyweight division. Both of them still have life left, depending on who walks away. They have both taken some really tough losses. So I have a hard time feeling strongly about who will prevail. I think Joyce probably has the edge. But these are heavyweights, right? They're always entertaining. People are always going to buy tickets. People are always going to watch. It provides a main event to hang. a full card on for the fans in the UK. And, is it the highest level fight? No, it really isn't. But you've got a lot of other interesting fights on the card. You have Turkey Allah Sheikh's favorite fighter, Mark Chamberlain, trying to come back on this card. You have Jack Rafferty on this card, who is going to go for the Commonwealth super lightweight title, which is meaningful to British fans. You have another lower level British heavyweight fight with David Adele. And, hey, early boxing, to tee up your day. Who hates that? Nobody.
Last bout to talk about here, Daniel, before we sign off. I'll get ready to shut things down for this episode. Tim Tszyu got blitzed in his last fight, right? Returns to the ring on the 6th in Australia, his home country, fighting Joe Spencer. The biggest news heading into this fight is that Tim Tszyu has banned his dad, Kostya Tszyu, from attending any of his fights. Simmering tensions, dare I say, between father and son. They hadn't had a real relationship for a long time. But when Costa showed up at Tim's last fight, Tim Tszyu not only lost, he got destroyed. So son is like, Dad, you can't come to my fights no more. Your thoughts on what is transpiring leading up to this upcoming fight between Tszyu and Spencer?
This is not the right time to have this type of distraction. This is Tim Tszyu making a comeback. Like I said, he's one of the guys who won 54 that can make middleweight pretty exciting, but unfortunately, like you mentioned, he did not exactly come out of his last fight unscathed. So this should be a bounce back fight. Normally, when you're gonna have a bounce back fight against somebody like Spencer, you need to have all your T's crossed, all your I's dotted. And not having those can cost you. We have seen plenty of situations where a gimme fight or a comeback fight has not worked out in the favor. Tim Tszyu cannot afford to fall into that trap, unfortunately, at this stage. Even though it's still technically a little bit early on in his career, we're in a sport, unfortunately, where 1 or 2 losses effectively takes you out of contention for a good while. And for Tszyu, like I understand, like I said, there's always family drama. It's kind of a revolving door dynamic between fathers and sons in the sport. But like I said, this is your rebound fight. You cannot afford to have this type of distraction. But I think he'll probably weather it out. He should win fairly easily, and hopefully rebuild his resume at 154. Maybe, like I said, the kid is big enough. Maybe try to make the move 160. And granted, we've seen what happens when he fights a really good fight. I wouldn't mind seeing him against Jovanik if Jovanik decides to stay in the division.
And I think we're going to end thing on that note. For those who are checking us out on YouTube, either now or later on, make sure you hit that like button. Also, make sure you hit that subscribe button. That way, you'll get notifications for any and all future episodes of Pound for Pound Boxing Report. Go to the panel here. We begin the show with ladies first. In the show with ladies first, Gail from nyfights.com. For those who want to chop it up with you and talk all things boxing, let the folks know where they can hit you up.
Oh, it's as easy as it gets. nyfights.com. NY Fights, and there's only one, Gail Falkenthal, on all social channels. And come join us on Blue Sky. There's a growing boxing community there. We are trying to get it more established in a healthier environment. So, Michael, you're there on Blue Sky. Daniel, you're there on Blue Sky, and so am I. And I think Tim and Costa will make up as long as Tim wins this weekend. But who are we kidding? We got to count on, at this point, Hamza Shiraz to come save that damn middleweight division.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll go to you, Daniel. Daniel from Four Boxing News, in the Inscriber, for those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk pro wrestling, for those who want to talk the NBA, especially when it comes to the Miami Heat. Let the folks know where they can hit you up.
All right, folks. It's the same handle everywhere: Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads, IG, the Mastodon still and spill. Rockers99, RAWKZ99. Catch me on there. And hopefully, like I said, it's been an interesting year so far, luckily, in the sport. And I know we've missed some news. Unfortunately, it does not look like we're going to be able to get rid of Jake Paul anytime soon. But hopefully, things get a little bit
Yeah, got to
brighter.
talk about that. Yeah, Paul signing Alicia Baumgartner, signing a host of Alicia Baumgartner. He signed the bantamweight champion. I can't remember her name right now. Signing a host of women's fighters. So he looks like he's making serious inroads when it comes to women's boxing. And yeah, talk of him wanted to fight Anthony Joshua, which is wild and just no. But go ahead, proceed.
No, it's mainly that. It's definitely catch me on there because it's not even that. Damn it.
Dina
If
Thorslin, that's
Amanda
what I'm
did,
thinking of. Dina Thorslin, he
yeah,
signed her as well.
yeah. And unfortunately, Amanda signed a lifetime deal with him on top of that.
Mistake, but go ahead.
Pretty much, yeah.
You should never sign a lifetime deal with a promoter. Never. But go ahead.
Oh, is that good? Sorry.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, for those who want to talk boxing, music, fitness, you know what it is, on Twitter, because I, like Daniel, refuse to call it X. Brother JR at Brother JR76. You can find me on Blue Sky at Brother JR76. You can find me on IG, Brother JRSC. On the next episode, we will do a recap of the fights uh, uh, between Zoo and Spencer. Hope to a recap of Joyce and Hrgovic, the recap of Alimkhanuly fighting Anauel, the Frenchman, and of course Richard Torrez and Vianello, excuse me, Guido Vianello, a 10-round heavyweight contest on ESPN Plus. Also, a preview of the unification bout at 147 pounds between IBF champion Jerron Boots Ennis, WBA champion Emiliano Stanionis, Raymond Ford. He's fighting on the undercard, and on that undercard, Arturo Popoca is fighting on that undercard as well. So I want to thank everybody who checked us out or checking us out currently. For Gail from nyfights.com, Daniel from Four Boxing News, and the Inscriber. I'm your host, Michael. This is episode 466 of Pound for Pound Box Report. We will see you guys next time. Everyone have a good evening. Good night.